The stone walls of Ashford Castle held the cold of February 1401 as if they had been carved from winter itself. Snow fell in silence over the Yorkshire countryside, blanketing the bare fields and frozen streams that stretched toward the dark line of forest. In the highest tower of the fortress, a single window remained lit, a faint glow against the gathering dusk. Inside that chamber, Duke Edmund Ashford stood motionless before a portrait that had haunted him for 3 long years. The painted face of Duchess Catherine gazed back at him with eyes the color of summer moss, her hands folded gently over the swell of her belly. She had been 22 when the artist captured her likeness. She had been 23 when the world told him she had died. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, but Edmund did not move toward its warmth. His daughter, Lady Eleanor, now 5 years old, slept in the nursery below, tended by women whose faces he barely recognized anymore. He had withdrawn from her, from everyone, from the very act of living. Grief had carved him hollow. "Your Grace." The voice of Sir William, his oldest and most loyal knight, broke the silence. "The physicians have examined the girl again. She remains well." Edmund did not turn. "Leave me." "My lord, you have not seen her in—" "I said leave me." Sir William's footsteps retreated, and the heavy door closed with a finality that echoed through the chamber. Edmund pressed his palm against the cold stone wall, feeling the centuries embedded in the rock. This castle had stood for 200 years. His family had ruled these lands since the conquest. And yet all of it, title, wealth, legacy, meant nothing without her. Catherine. They had told him she died in childbirth, that the fever had taken her 3 days after Eleanor was born, that her body had been prepared and buried in the family crypt before he could return from the Scottish border, where King Henry had sent him to negotiate a fragile peace. He had ridden for 5 days without rest, but he had arrived too late. Too late to say farewell. Too late to hold her hand. Too late to beg forgiveness for leaving her alone. The guilt had become a second skin. 3 years had passed like a slow hemorrhage. Edmund performed his duties to the crown with mechanical precision, attended Parliament in Westminster, dispensed justice in his courts, collected rents from his tenants. But the man who had once been known for his laughter, for his skill with a lute, for his passion for falconry, had vanished entirely. Lady Eleanor grew in the care of nursemaids and tutors. She had her mother's dark hair and delicate features, but Edmund could not bear to look at her. Every time he tried, he saw Catherine's face, heard her voice asking him not to leave, felt the phantom weight of promises broken. "She asks for you, my lord." Dame Margaret, the head of the household, stood in the doorway of the great hall where Edmund sat alone at a table meant for 40 guests. "She wants to know when her father will come to tell her a story." Edmund stared at the untouched wine in his cup. "Tell her I am occupied." "She is 5 years old, your grace. She does not understand occupation. She understands absence. Then she will learn what this world teaches all of us." His voice was hollow. "That those we love leave, and we are powerless to stop them." Dame Margaret's expression tightened with something between pity and frustration, but she curtsied and withdrew. Edmund sat in the shadows of the hall, surrounded by tapestries depicting his ancestors in battle, in triumph, in glory. None of them had failed as he had failed. The days blurred together. Winter gave way to a reluctant spring, but the castle remained shrouded in a gloom that no season could lift. The servants spoke in whispers. The guards moved like ghosts along the battlements. And in the highest tower, Edmund continued his solitary vigil before Catherine's portrait, speaking to her in the darkness, begging her forgiveness, receiving only silence in return. If you too cherish stories of loss, resilience, and love, reborn from the ashes of grief, subscribe to this channel so you never miss a tale that honors the depth of the human heart in all its fragility and strength. On a morning in late April, a small traveling party arrived at the castle gates. A single covered wagon drawn by 2 tired horses, accompanied by a woman on foot and a young boy who could not have been more than 10 years old. The guards, accustomed to turning away beggars and merchants, nearly sent them away until the woman spoke. "I am Marjorie of Lincoln, healer and midwife. I have treated nobles and peasants alike from London to Durham. I seek shelter for one night and offer my services in exchange." The captain of the guard, a grizzled man named Thomas, studied her with skepticism. She wore the simple woolen dress of a commoner, but her bearing was straight, her gaze direct. Her hands, he noticed, were clean and her nails trimmed, unusual for someone who traveled the roads. "We have our own physicians, woman. The Duke has no need of—" "Every household has need of a healer who knows herbs in childbirth, sir. If your Duchess or any noble lady is with child, or if there are children in the keep who suffer from cough or fever, I may be of use." Her voice was calm, measured. "I ask only for a warm place to sleep and a meal for myself and my son." Thomas hesitated. There had been a fever among the younger servants recently. 2 scullery maids had fallen ill, and the castle physician, an elderly man more skilled in bloodletting than actual healing, had done little to help them. "Wait here." He returned 20 minutes later and opened the gates. "Dame Margaret will see you. If she finds you acceptable, you may stay, but you'll work for your keep." Marjorie inclined her head. "I expect nothing less." Dame Margaret met the healer in the courtyard, her expression skeptical but her desperation barely concealed. "We have 2 girls with fever. Can you help them?" Marjorie set down her traveling satchel and opened it to reveal bundles of dried herbs, small clay jars, and clean linen bandages. "Let me see them." Within an hour, she had examined both girls, prepared poultices of yarrow and chamomile, and instructed the kitchen maids on brewing a tea of elderflower and mint. Her movements were efficient, her voice kind but firm. By evening, both girls were resting more comfortably, their fevers beginning to break. Dame Margaret watched all of this with growing respect. "You are skilled. Where did you learn?" "From my mother, who learned from hers, and from years of necessity." Marjorie washed her hands in a basin, her face unreadable. "I have delivered over 200 babies, tended battlefield wounds, and fought more fevers than I can count. The body is a mystery, but it follows certain laws. Learn those laws, and you can sometimes tip the balance toward life. Will you stay longer than one night? I can pay you. Not much, but I will stay as long as I am useful." Marjorie's eyes drifted toward the window that overlooked the inner garden. "That is a beautiful space. Does anyone tend it?" "Lady Eleanor plays there sometimes, but it has been neglected." That evening, as the sun set behind the hills and cast long shadows across the castle grounds, Marjorie walked through the garden. It had once been magnificent, roses, lavender, thyme, and medicinal herbs growing in careful plots around a central fountain. Now it was overgrown, the fountain dry, the paths choked with weeds. She knelt beside a patch of overgrown chamomile and began to clear the weeds with her hands. The work was meditative, familiar. And as she worked, she began to hum, an old lullaby her own mother had sung, a melody that spoke of starlight and safety, of love that endured beyond death. "That's pretty." Marjorie turned to find a small girl standing at the edge of the garden. She wore a fine linen dress, her dark hair braided and pinned, her face solemn and watchful. "Lady Eleanor, I presume?" Marjorie smiled gently. The child nodded. "Are you the healer? Dame Margaret said you made Anna and Beth feel better." "I did my best. Do you come to this garden often?" "Sometimes, but it's sad now. My mother used to grow flowers here." Eleanor's voice was quiet, matter of fact. "She died when I was born. My father doesn't come here anymore." Marjorie's hands stilled in the dirt. Something in the child's tone, resigned, lonely, far too old for her years, struck a chord deep in her chest. "Would you like to help me clear these weeds? We could make it beautiful again." Eleanor hesitated, then nodded. She knelt beside Marjorie, and together they worked in silence as the stars began to appear above them. And after a while, Marjorie began to sing again, softly, tenderly, the same lullaby. Eleanor's small voice joined hers, hesitant at first, then growing stronger. In the highest tower, Edmund stood at his window and heard the sound carried on the evening breeze. A woman's voice, singing, and a child's voice, fragile and sweet, singing with her. His hands tightened on the stone sill. For 3 years he had heard nothing from that garden but wind and emptiness. Who was this stranger singing in Catherine's garden? And why did the sound of it feel like a blade sliding between his ribs? If you feel the ache of this moment, a father who cannot see his child, a song that pierces grief, write in the comments, "Let love reach you, even through the walls you've built." Let me know you're here, bearing witness to this story. Edmund did not sleep that night. He stood at the window until the singing stopped, until the garden fell silent and the child was surely returned to her bed. Then he descended the tower stairs for the first time in weeks and made his way through the darkened corridors to the nursery. He stood outside the door, his hand on the latch, unable to open it. Inside, he could hear Eleanor's soft breathing. The crackle of the small fire kept burning for her warmth. Dame Margaret had left a candle burning low on the table. "She asked about you again tonight, my lord." Edmund turned sharply. Dame Margaret stood in the hallway, her face lined with exhaustion and something fiercer, disappointment. "She is well cared for," Edmund said stiffly. "She is cared for, yes, but she is not loved. Not by the one person whose love she craves most." Dame Margaret stepped closer, her voice dropping. "Your grief is your own, your grace, and I do not presume to judge it. But that child did not choose to be born. She did not choose to live while her mother died, and every day you turn away from her, you punish her for a sin she did not commit." The words struck him like a physical blow. "I do not—" "You do, whether you intend it or not." Dame Margaret's eyes glistened. "The Duchess Catherine would weep to see what you have become. She loved you. She loved that child. And you dishonor both by retreating into this tomb of self-pity." She turned and walked away before he could respond, her footsteps echoing down the stone corridor. Edmund stood frozen, his heart pounding. Self-pity. Was that what this was? Or was it simply the only way he knew to survive? He pressed his forehead against the cool wood of the nursery door, listening to Eleanor's breathing, and felt something crack open inside his chest, a fissure in the wall he had built stone by stone around his heart. Marjorie of Lincoln remained at Ashford Castle. Within a week, she had treated a dozen ailments, reorganized the stillroom where medicines were prepared, and begun teaching the kitchen girls how to recognize useful herbs. Dame Margaret offered her a permanent position, and Marjorie accepted with quiet gratitude. But there was something in the healer's eyes, something watchful and sad, that Dame Margaret could not quite decipher. Marjorie spent her mornings tending to the sick, and her afternoons in the garden with Eleanor. The child blossomed under the attention. She learned the names of plants, how to harvest lavender without bruising the stems, how to tie bundles of thyme to dry in the stillroom. And every evening, as the sun set, Marjorie sang. Eleanor began to smile again, to laugh, to ask questions about the world beyond the castle walls. "Did you have a daughter?" Eleanor asked one afternoon as they planted rosemary seedlings. Marjorie's hands paused. "Why do you ask?" "Because you're kind to me the way I think mothers are kind, and you sing the songs mothers sing." "I had a daughter once," Marjorie said quietly. "But she is elsewhere now." "Did she die too?" "No, but I cannot be with her. Not yet." Marjorie smoothed dirt around the base of a seedling, her expression distant. "Sometimes life asks us to make impossible choices, little one. And sometimes the only choice that allows someone you love to survive is to step away and let them live without you." Eleanor frowned, not fully understanding but sensing the pain beneath the words. She reached out and took Marjorie's hand. "I'm glad you're here now." Marjorie's eyes filled with tears. She blinked away quickly. "So am I." It was inevitable that Edmund would eventually cross paths with the healer. It happened on a morning in early May in the Great Hall, where Marjorie had been summoned to treat the castle steward for a persistent cough. Edmund entered the hall to review accounts with the same steward and stopped short when he saw a woman kneeling beside the man, her hands pressing gently against his chest as she listened to his breathing. "Who are you?" Edmund's voice was sharp, startling both the steward and the healer. Marjorie rose smoothly and curtsied. "Marjorie of Lincoln, your grace. I am the healer Dame Margaret employed to tend the household." Edmund studied her. She was perhaps 30 years old, with dark hair braided simply and eyes that were familiar somehow, unsettling. She met his gaze without flinching, but there was no challenge in her expression, only a calm professionalism. "I did not authorize the hiring of a healer." "No, your grace. Dame Margaret did, when 2 of your servants fell ill and your physician was unavailable. I have since treated a dozen members of your household and restored your wife's garden with your daughter's help." At the mention of Catherine and Eleanor in the same breath, Edmund's jaw tightened. "You presume much." "I presume nothing. I state facts." Marjorie's tone remained even. "Your daughter finds comfort in the garden. I find purpose in tending it. If that offends you, I will stop." "I did not say—" Edmund broke off, frustrated by her composure and his own lack of it. "You sing there." "I do. Your daughter enjoys singing." "You sing my wife's songs." Marjorie tilted her head slightly. "I sing the songs my mother taught me. If they were also your wife's songs, then perhaps we shared a teacher. Music belongs to all who need it, your grace." The steward coughed awkwardly, and Edmund realized they had an audience. He turned on his heel. "Continue your work, but stay out of my sight." Marjorie curtsied again. "As you wish, my lord." But Edmund could not stay away from the window that overlooked the garden. Every evening, he found himself drawn there, watching as Marjorie and Eleanor worked among the flowers, listening as they sang together. The sound was both balm and torment. Eleanor was changing. He could see it even from this distance. The solemn, silent child who had moved through the castle like a ghost was becoming vibrant, curious, alive. She laughed. She ran. She spoke with animation to the healer as they knelt side by side in the dirt. And Edmund felt the guilt twist deeper. This stranger, this common healer, had given his daughter what he could not: joy. One evening he descended to the garden after they had left. He walked the paths they had cleared, touched the herbs they had planted. The fountain had been repaired. Water trickled gently into the basin. Roses were beginning to bud. The air smelled of lavender and rosemary. Catherine had planted this garden when they were first married. She had spent hours here, singing as she worked, her hands always stained with earth. He had teased her for it, called her his peasant Duchess, and she had laughed and smeared dirt on his cheek in retaliation. The memory rose unbidden, and with it came a wave of grief so powerful it drove him to his knees on the stone path. "Catherine," he whispered, "I cannot do this. I cannot live without you." "But you are living." Marjorie's voice came from behind him, quiet and firm. "Whether you wish to or not." Edmund surged to his feet, furious at being discovered in such a state. "I told you to stay out of my sight. I left my shears here. I came to retrieve them." She held up the small pruning tool. "I did not intend to intrude on your grief, your grace. But I will not apologize for speaking truth. You know nothing of my grief. I know that it is consuming you. I know that it blinds you to the living child who needs you. And I know that wherever your wife is now, if the soul endures beyond death, as I believe it does, she would not want this for you or for Eleanor." Edmund's hands clenched into fists. "How dare you speak of her? You did not know her." Marjorie met his eyes, and for a moment something flickered there. Something that looked almost like recognition, like sorrow, like a secret too heavy to bear. "You are right," she said softly. "I did not know her, but I know what it is to lose everything. And I know that love does not honor the dead by abandoning the living." She turned and walked away, leaving Edmund standing alone in the garden as the last light faded from the sky. The next morning, Eleanor appeared at her father's study, a room she had never entered before. She knocked timidly on the heavy oak door, her heart pounding. "Enter." Edmund's voice was distant, distracted. Eleanor pushed the door open and stepped inside. The study was lined with books and maps, the desk covered in documents and ledgers. Her father sat behind it, quill in hand, and looked up in surprise when he saw her. "Eleanor." He set the quill down carefully. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to see you." Her voice was small but steady. "Dame Margaret says I should not disturb you, but I miss you." Edmund's throat constricted. "I am very busy." "I know, but could you be busy later? Just for a little while?" Eleanor took a tentative step forward. "Marjorie and I planted roses, the kind with pink petals. She says they were Mother's favorite. I thought maybe you would like to see them." The mention of Catherine sent a familiar lance of pain through his chest, but this time it was accompanied by something else, a faint warmth, a tiny ember of something that might have been hope. "Your mother did love pink roses," he said quietly. "Will you come see them? Please?" Edmund looked at his daughter, truly looked at her, for the first time in longer than he could remember. She had Catherine's eyes, Catherine's delicate features. But there was something of him there too, in the set of her jaw, the determination in her gaze. "Not now," he said, and watched her face fall. "But tomorrow, in the afternoon. I will come to the garden tomorrow." Eleanor's face lit up like sunrise. "Truly, truly." She ran around the desk and threw her arms around him in an impulsive embrace that froze him in place. He did not know what to do with his hands, how to respond to this sudden overflow of affection. But slowly, carefully, he placed one hand on her dark hair and let it rest there. "Thank you, Father," she whispered. When she left, Edmund sat motionless at his desk for a long time, his hand still tingling from the warmth of her hair, his heart beating in an unfamiliar rhythm that might have been the beginning of healing. The following afternoon, Edmund kept his promise. He descended to the garden where Marjorie and Eleanor were working. They both looked up as he approached, and for a moment no one spoke. "Father!" Eleanor scrambled to her feet and ran to him. "Look, the roses are budding, and we planted lavender along the path, and thyme by the fountain, and—" "Slowly, child." But there was no harshness in his voice. "Show me." Eleanor took his hand, a touch that felt both foreign and achingly familiar, and led him through the garden, pointing out everything they had done. Marjorie followed at a distance, silent and watchful. Edmund listened to his daughter's enthusiasm, saw the pride in her eyes, and felt something fundamental shift inside him. This garden was no longer a monument to the dead. It was becoming a place of life again. When Eleanor ran ahead to check on the fountain, Edmund turned to Marjorie. "You have done well here. Your daughter did most of it, Your Grace. She has her mother's gift for growing things. You speak of my wife as if you knew her." Marjorie's expression remained carefully neutral. "I speak from what your daughter has told me, and from what I see in the garden itself. The design, the choice of plants. It speaks of someone who understood beauty and purpose together." "She did." Edmund's voice roughened. "She understood many things I did not. It is not too late to learn them." "Is it not?" He looked at her directly. "I have been absent from my daughter's life for 3 years. I have failed her in every way a father can fail. How does one repair such damage? By beginning. By showing up, as you are doing now. By choosing every day to try." Marjorie's eyes held his. "Grief is not a sin, Your Grace. But using it as an excuse to abandon those who still need you, that becomes one." Edmund flinched. "You are remarkably bold for a commoner in the presence of a duke." "I am a healer. I speak truth, whether it is welcome or not. Lives depend on it." She paused. "And I have found that rank means little when measured against the weight of a child's heart." Before Edmund could respond, Eleanor called out. "Father, come see the roses, they're opening." Edmund went to his daughter's side and knelt in the dirt beside her, something he had not done in years. Together they examined the delicate pink petals unfurling in the spring sunshine, and for the first time since Catherine's death, Edmund felt the faintest whisper of peace. In the weeks that followed, Edmund began to spend more time with Eleanor. It was awkward at first. He did not know how to talk to a 5-year-old, did not know what games she liked or what stories she wanted to hear. But Eleanor was patient with him, eager for any scrap of attention, and slowly they found their way. Marjorie continued to work in the garden and tend to the household sick, but Edmund noticed she always withdrew when he arrived, giving father and daughter space to be alone together. He was grateful for it, though he would not have admitted it aloud. One evening in early June, as the long twilight softened into night, Edmund sat with Eleanor in the garden. They had been reading together, a book of old tales that had belonged to Catherine. Eleanor had fallen asleep against his shoulder, and Edmund was reluctant to wake her. From somewhere in the garden, a nightingale began to sing. The sound was piercingly beautiful, a cascade of liquid notes that seemed to hold all the joy and sorrow of the world in their melody. Edmund closed his eyes and listened, and for the first time since Catherine's death, he allowed himself to remember her without flinching away from the pain. He remembered their wedding day, how she had laughed when he nearly dropped the ring. He remembered the first time she told him she was with child, the wonder in her eyes. He remembered her voice singing in this very garden, her hands stained with earth, her face turned up to the sun. The nightingale sings for those who have loved and lost. Edmund opened his eyes to find Marjorie standing a few paces away, her face shadowed in the gathering darkness. "I thought you had retired for the evening," he said. "I heard the bird and came to listen. I did not mean to intrude. You seem to make a habit of witnessing my private moments. This garden is not large, Your Grace. Privacy here is an illusion." She smiled faintly. "But I will leave you in peace." "No, stay." The word surprised him even as he spoke it. "Eleanor is asleep. I do not wish to wake her yet, and the bird is worth hearing." Marjorie inclined her head and settled onto a stone bench nearby. They sat in silence as the nightingale sang, and the stars began to appear above them. "My wife loved nightingales," Edmund said quietly. "She said they sang to remind us that beauty can exist even in darkness." She was wise. She was. He looked down at Eleanor's sleeping face, and I have wasted 3 years that I could have spent honoring her memory by loving our daughter. You are loving her now. That is what matters. Edmund was silent for a long moment. "Why did you come here? To Ashford, I mean. A healer of your skill could find employment in any great household. Why choose a castle wrapped in mourning?" Marjorie's expression became distant. "I go where I am needed, and this place, this child, needed healing as much as any wound I have ever tended. You speak in riddles." "Perhaps. Or perhaps some truths are too painful to speak plainly." She rose from the bench. "Your daughter will wake soon and be cold. You should take her inside." She left before he could press further, and Edmund was left with the nightingale song and a growing certainty that Marjorie of Lincoln carried secrets as deep as his own. A week later, disaster struck. Eleanor woke in the night burning with fever, her small body racked with chills. Dame Margaret summoned the castle physician, but the old man could do nothing but recommend bloodletting, a treatment that would have weakened the child further. "No!" Edmund's voice was absolute. "Send for Marjorie." Marjorie arrived within minutes, still in her nightdress with a shawl thrown over her shoulders. She took one look at Eleanor and began issuing orders with calm efficiency. "Bring me cool water and clean cloths. Prepare a tea of willow bark and elderflower. And I need feverfew from the garden, fresh, not dried." For 3 days and nights, Marjorie did not leave Eleanor's side. She bathed the child's burning skin with cool water, coaxed her to sip medicinal teas, monitored her breathing and heartbeat. And through it all she sang, soft, wordless melodies that seemed to wrap around Eleanor like a protective charm. Edmund kept vigil as well, refusing to sleep, refusing to leave his daughter's bedside. He watched Marjorie work with a fierce concentration that reminded him of soldiers he had seen in battle, focused, determined, willing their comrades to survive through sheer force of will. On the third night, as Eleanor's fever finally began to break, Edmund spoke into the silence. "Why do you care so much? She is not your child." Marjorie did not look up from bathing Eleanor's face. "Every child is my child when they are in my care. That is what it means to be a healer. It is more than that. I see it in the way you look at her, the way you sing to her." He leaned forward. "Who are you, Marjorie of Lincoln? Truly?" Marjorie's hands stilled. For a long moment she did not respond. Then she set down the cloth and met his eyes. "I am someone who understands what it means to love a child and be powerless to protect her from the cruelty of the world. I am someone who has made choices that tore my heart in two. And I am someone who would give anything, to see her safe and loved. You speak of Eleanor. I speak of every child who suffers because the world is harsh and love is complicated." She looked away. "Your daughter will recover, Your Grace. The fever is breaking. She will wake by morning. Thanks to you. Thanks to willow bark and clean water and the grace of God. I am only the instrument." Edmund did not believe that for a moment. He had seen the way she had fought for Eleanor's life with every ounce of knowledge and skill she possessed. Whatever secrets Marjorie carried, whatever pain shadowed her eyes, one thing was certain. She loved his daughter as fiercely as any mother could. And that thought, when it fully formed in his mind, struck him with the force of revelation. Eleanor recovered, as Marjorie had promised. Within days she was back in the garden, though Marjorie insisted she rest often and drink plenty of water. Edmund watched them together, the healer's tender attention, Eleanor's absolute trust, and could not shake the feeling that he was missing something crucial. He began to investigate. Quietly, carefully, he questioned the guards who had admitted Marjorie to the castle. He spoke to the servants she had treated, asking about her methods, her speech, her bearing. And the more he learned, the more convinced he became that Marjorie was no common healer. She read and wrote with perfect fluency, unusual for someone of her supposed station. Her knowledge of herbs and medicine was encyclopedic, suggesting years of formal study. And there was something about her mannerisms, the way she held herself, the precision of her speech, that spoke of noble upbringing. One afternoon, he confronted Dame Margaret in her chambers. "What do you know of Marjorie's past?" Dame Margaret looked up from her mending, startled. "Very little, my lord. She arrived seeking shelter and proved herself useful. I did not press her for details." "And you saw nothing strange in that? A woman of obvious education and skill, traveling the roads with only a young boy for company?" "The roads are full of displaced people, Your Grace. The wars, the plagues. They have torn families apart and sent nobles and peasants alike wandering in search of safety. I assumed she was one of many." Dame Margaret set down her needle. "Why do you ask?" "Because I believe she is hiding something, or hiding from something, and I would know what it is before I allow her to continue in close proximity to my daughter. She saved your daughter's life. I know that, which is why I hesitate to act. But I am a duke, Dame Margaret. I have enemies. I have responsibilities. I cannot afford to be careless about who I trust within these walls." Dame Margaret considered him carefully. "You have begun to care for her." "For Eleanor, yes. I have... No. For Marjorie." Edmund froze. "That is absurd." "Is it? You watch her with your daughter. You linger in the garden when she is there. You speak to her with a respect you show few others, despite her station." Dame Margaret's expression softened. "It is not absurd, Your Grace. It is human. You have been alone for 3 years, and she is a mystery. Nothing more." Edmund turned away. "But I will solve that mystery. For Eleanor's sake, if nothing else." Edmund waited until evening, when Eleanor had been put to bed and the castle had settled into its nighttime routine. He found Marjorie in the still room preparing medicines by candlelight. "We need to speak." His tone was formal, edged with authority. Marjorie looked up, her expression wary. "As you wish, Your Grace." "Who are you? And do not tell me you are simply a healer from Lincoln. I have made inquiries. There is no record of a healer named Marjorie in that city, nor in York, nor in any of the surrounding towns. Marjorie is my name. The rest is complicated. Uncomplicated." Edmund stepped closer. "You have unusual education for a commoner. You read Latin. I have seen you studying the medical texts in the library. You move with the bearing of nobility, and you look at my daughter with a love that goes beyond professional care." His voice dropped. "Who are you?" Marjorie set down the pestle she had been using and met his eyes. "I am someone who made a choice 3 years ago that I cannot unmake. I am someone who gave up everything to protect the person I loved most in the world. And I am someone who will continue to protect her, even if it means you cast me out of this castle tonight." "Protect her from what?" "From the truth that would destroy her." Edmund's heart began to pound. "What truth?" Marjorie's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the work table. "Your Grace, I beg you not to press me further. Not now, not tonight. Eleanor is healing. She is happy. Let that be enough." "It is not enough!" Edmund's voice rose, frustration and confusion warring inside him. "You speak in circles. You evade every question. And all the while you are in my home, caring for my child, and I know nothing about you beyond the fact that you saved her life and that you sing the same songs my wife." He stopped abruptly. The same songs, the same herb garden, the same green eyes. The recognition hit him like a physical blow, stealing his breath, making the room spin. "No," he whispered. "No, it is not possible." Marjorie's face had gone pale as death. "Edmund, do not call me that. You have no right to—" He staggered backward, his mind reeling. "Catherine?" She closed her eyes, a single tear sliding down her cheek. "Yes." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Edmund gripped the doorframe to steady himself, his thoughts a chaotic storm of impossibility and desperate hope. "You died. They told me you died. I saw your tomb. I mourned you for 3 years." "I know." Catherine's voice, Marjorie's voice, God, how had he not recognized it, broke on the words. "I know what you were told, I know what you believed, and I am sorry, I am so desperately sorry." "Sorry?" Edmund's voice was raw. "You let me believe you were dead. You let me grieve. You let Eleanor grow up without her mother. And you say you are sorry?" "I had no choice." She stepped toward him, her eyes blazing with a pain that matched his own. "I had no choice, Edmund. If I had stayed, if they had known I survived, who? Who would have threatened you?" "Your brother." The name fell between them like a stone into still water, sending ripples of horror through Edmund's understanding. "Robert!" Catherine nodded, her face etched with old terror. "He came to me 3 days after Eleanor was born. I was weak from the delivery, barely able to stand. He told me that if I did not disappear, if I did not leave and never return, he would ensure that Eleanor did not live to see her first birthday." Edmund felt the blood drain from his face. "That is insane. Robert would not—" "Robert wanted your title, your lands, your wealth, and I was in his way. As long as I lived, as long as Eleanor lived, you had heirs. But if we both died, if you were left alone and grieving, he thought he could manipulate you into naming him your heir. Or failing that, he could simply arrange an accident. You are saying my brother planned to murder you, to murder our child. I am saying he gave me a choice, leave and let you believe me dead, or stay and watch Eleanor die. So I chose." Her voice shattered. "I chose to leave, to give up everything, to let you mourn me so that she could live." Edmund's legs gave out. He sank onto a stool, his head in his hands, trying to comprehend the magnitude of what she was telling him. "The fever," he said hoarsely, "the burial, all of it was staged, with the help of the midwife who attended me and 2 loyal servants who have since left the country. We made it appear that I had died of childbed fever. They buried someone else in my place, a poor woman who had died in childbirth the same week. And I took a new name and left Yorkshire. For 3 years. For 3 years. I wandered. I worked as a healer. I stayed away from anywhere Robert might hear of me, and I watched Eleanor from a distance whenever I dared, gathering news of her through travelers and merchants. She wiped her eyes, until I heard she had fallen ill, and I could not stay away any longer, even if it meant risking discovery, even if it meant facing you and seeing the hatred in your eyes." Edmund looked up at her. This woman he had loved. This woman he had mourned. This woman who had torn his world apart twice now, once by leaving, once by returning. "I do not hate you," he said, his voice hollow. "I do not know what I feel, but it is not hatred." They sat in the still room until the candles burned low, and Catherine told him everything. How Robert had threatened her in the dead of night, showing her a vial of poison and describing in graphic detail how easily a baby could be made to stop breathing. How she had made the agonizing choice to trust him at his word, because to risk calling his bluff would have meant gambling with Eleanor's life. How she had spent 3 years in exile, changing her appearance, learning healing arts to survive, and living in a constant state of terror that Robert would discover she still lived and make good on his threat. "Why did you not come to me?" Edmund demanded. "Why did you not tell me before you left?" "Because you would have stopped me. You would have confronted Robert, and he would have killed you both." Catherine's voice was firm. "Your brother is ruthless, Edmund. You have always refused to see it because he is blood. But I saw it. I saw the calculation in his eyes. And I knew that if I told you, if I involved you, he would not hesitate to remove every obstacle between himself and power. So you made the choice alone. I made the only choice I could live with. I could survive losing you, barely, but I could survive it. I could not survive losing Eleanor." Edmund stood and paced the small room, his mind working furiously. "Robert has been in France for the past year, serving the king in negotiations. I know. That is why I dared to return. But he will come back eventually, and if he discovers you here, then I will leave again, as I have always planned to do." Catherine stood as well, her spine straight despite the tears on her face. "I came to heal Eleanor. She is well now. I will leave before Robert returns, and you can go back to your life. You can even find Eleanor a proper mother, someone who can be present, who can—" "Stop!" Edmund's voice cut through her words like a blade. "Just stop." He crossed to her in 3 strides and took her face in his hands, hands that trembled with the force of everything he was feeling. "You are her mother. You are my wife, and I am not letting you disappear again. Do you understand me? I am not letting you go. Edmund, you do not understand what you are. I understand perfectly. My brother is a threat. Very well. Then we deal with that threat. But we deal with it together, as we should have from the beginning." Catherine closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. "I am so tired, Edmund. So tired of running. So tired of pretending. So tired of watching my daughter from a distance and not being able to hold her. Then stop running. Stop pretending. Come back to us. Truly. And Robert? Let me worry about Robert." Edmund's jaw set with a determination Catherine recognized from their early years together when he had fought to win her hand against her father's objections. "I am not the grief-stricken wreck I was 3 years ago, and I am not defenseless. If my brother is a threat, then I will remove that threat, but I will not lose you again." They did not tell Eleanor immediately. Edmund and Catherine, she could not think of herself as Marjorie anymore, not with him, agreed that the child needed to be protected from the full truth until they had dealt with Robert. But they also agreed that Catherine could not simply continue as the healer. It was too dangerous, too fragile a fiction now that Edmund knew. "We will tell the household that Marjorie is leaving," Edmund proposed, "that she has been called away to tend to a family emergency. Then, in a month's time, you will return. As yourself." "How?" Catherine asked. "How do you explain a wife rising from the dead?" "The same way you explained her death." "We lie." Edmund's expression was grim. "We will say that there was a mistake. That the woman who died was not you, but someone who resembled you. That you were taken ill and confused and wandered away from the castle and have only now recovered your memory and returned. No one will believe that. As they will if I command them to. I am the Duke. My word is law in these lands." Catherine shook her head. "And Robert, when he hears of this miracle resurrection?" "I will be ready for him." Edmund's hand moved to the sword that hung at his belt, a gesture that was more reassurance than threat. "I have contacts at court, friends who owe me favors. If Robert has been scheming, there will be evidence. And if not, then I will make it clear that any threat to you or Eleanor will be met with the full force of my power and my rage. You would go to war with your own brother. I would do far more than that to keep you safe." Edmund's eyes were fierce. "I failed you once, Catherine. I left you alone when you needed me most. I will not fail you again." 3 days later, Marjorie of Lincoln said goodbye to Lady Eleanor in the garden. The child wept bitterly, clinging to the healer's skirts. "Please don't go. You promised you would stay. You promised." "I know, little one, and I wish I could keep that promise." Catherine's voice was thick with tears. "But sometimes we must leave the people we love to keep them safe." "I don't understand. Who are you keeping safe? Me?" "Yes, you most of all." Catherine knelt and took Eleanor's face in her hands, memorizing every feature. "But I want you to know something, Eleanor. I want you to know that I love you more than anything in this world, more than my own life. And that love does not end just because I must go away. Will you come back? I hope so. Promise me. Promise you'll try." Catherine pulled her daughter into an embrace, holding her so tightly it hurt. "I promise." Edmund watched from the window of his study, his heart breaking at the sight. But this was necessary. For the plan to work, the household had to believe Marjorie was truly leaving. The healer's wagon departed that afternoon, and Eleanor refused to eat or speak for the rest of the day. She shut herself in her room and would not come out, even for her father. Edmund sat outside her door that evening, speaking to her through the wood. "I know you are hurting, Eleanor. I know you loved Marjorie very much." Silence. "I loved her too. She reminded me of someone very special, someone I lost." A small voice came from inside the room. "Mother?" Edmund's breath caught. "Yes." "Your mother. Do you miss her?" "Every day. I miss Marjorie every minute." "I know." Edmund pressed his palm against the door. "But I promise you, Eleanor, that the people we love never truly leave us. They stay in our hearts. And sometimes, if we are very lucky and very brave, they find their way back to us. Do you believe that? I do now." 4 weeks later, a rider arrived at Ashford Castle with news that sent the entire household into chaos. The Duchess Catherine had been found. She had been discovered in a convent near Durham, recovering from an illness that had robbed her of her memory. The nuns had cared for her for 3 years, not knowing who she was, until her memory had suddenly returned. She was weak but alive, and she was coming home. The household erupted in a frenzy of preparation. Rooms were cleaned, fires lit, the best linens brought out. Dame Margaret wept with joy. The servants who had loved Catherine whispered prayers of thanksgiving, and Eleanor, when she was told, stared at her father with wide, disbelieving eyes. "Mother is alive?" "Yes. Truly. Truly. She will be here by tomorrow evening." Eleanor's face crumpled, and she burst into tears. not of sorrow, but of overwhelming relief and joy. Edmund held her as she sobbed and felt his own tears fall into her hair. Catherine arrived as the sun was setting, riding in a simple carriage with only a single attendant. She had changed her appearance slightly, cut her hair shorter, changed the style of her dress, but when she stepped out of the carriage and into the courtyard, there was no mistaking who she was. Eleanor ran to her before anyone could stop her, flying across the stones and into Catherine's arms with a cry of, "Mother!" Catherine caught her daughter and held her, both of them weeping, both of them laughing, both of them whole at last. Edmund stood in the doorway of the great hall and watched them, his throat tight with emotion. When Catherine looked up and met his eyes over Eleanor's head, the love and gratitude in her gaze nearly undid him. The household cheered, the servants wept, and for the first time in 3 years, Ashford Castle felt like a home instead of a tomb. But the peace was short-lived. 2 weeks after Catherine's return, a messenger arrived with news that Robert had learned of his sister-in-law's miraculous resurrection and was on his way back to England. Edmund wasted no time. He had spent the past month gathering evidence of Robert's schemes, payments to assassins, letters discussing the removal of obstacles, testimony from servants Robert had tried to bribe. It was not enough to convict him in a court, perhaps, but it was more than enough to destroy his reputation and remove him as a threat. When Robert arrived at Ashford, he found not a grieving brother, but a duke armed with knowledge and power. "You tried to murder my wife," Edmund said without preamble, meeting Robert in the great hall with 6 armed guards at his back. "You threatened my daughter, and you thought you could manipulate me into making you my heir." Robert's face went pale, then red with fury. "That is absurd. I have no idea what lies Catherine has told you, but it is not Catherine's word I am relying on." Edmund gestured, and Sir William stepped forward with a wooden box. "It is yours." Inside the box were letters in Robert's own hand, detailing his plans with chilling clarity. How he had procured the contents of Catherine's still room. Also, payments made to the servants who had helped fake Catherine's death. Servants he had later tried to have killed to ensure their silence. Robert stared at the evidence, his face draining of all color. "You have 2 choices," Edmund said, his voice cold as winter iron. "You can leave England tonight and never return, forfeiting any claim to my lands or title. Or you can face trial for attempted murder, treason, and conspiracy. Choose quickly." Robert's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Edmund thought he might actually be foolish enough to fight, but then the older brother's shoulders sagged in defeat. I will leave. Tonight. You have until dawn to be beyond my borders. If you ever return, if you ever threaten my family again, I will not hesitate to have you hanged. Am I understood?" "Yes." Robert's voice was barely a whisper. He left within the hour, riding into the darkness with only the clothes on his back and a small purse of coins. Edmund watched him go from the battlements, Catherine at his side. "Is it truly over?" she asked. "Yes." Edmund took her hand. "We are safe now. All of us." Summer came to Yorkshire in full glory. The garden that Catherine and Eleanor had planted together bloomed with roses, lavender, and thyme. The castle, which had been shrouded in grief for so long, rang with laughter and music. Catherine resumed her place as Duchess, but she also continued her work as a healer. She trained the castle's servants in basic medicine, established a proper still room, and opened a small infirmary for the tenants who could not afford physicians. Edmund, for his part, became the father Eleanor had always needed. He read to her every night, taught her to ride, walked with her in the garden, and listened with genuine interest to her endless questions about the world. And in the evenings, when the day's work was done and the castle settled into its nighttime rhythms, the 3 of them would gather in the garden, Edmund, Catherine, and Eleanor, and they would sing together. One evening, as the stars appeared above them and the nightingale added its voice to theirs, Eleanor looked up at her parents with shining eyes. "We are together now. We are a family." "We always were, little one," Catherine said softly, "even when we were apart. Love does not end because of distance. It endures." "And we will never be apart again," Edmund added, pulling both his wife and daughter close. "I promise you that." Eleanor nestled between them, content and safe, and began to sing again, the same lullaby Catherine had sung in this garden 3 years ago, when she had been forced to leave everything behind. But now the song was no longer one of sorrow and loss. It was a song of homecoming, of healing, of love that had survived the worst the world could throw at it and emerged stronger. Edmund closed his eyes and let the music wash over him. For 3 years he had been trapped in darkness, convinced that his life was over, that joy was impossible, that he would never again feel whole. He had been wrong. As Catherine's voice blended with Eleanor's, as the nightingale sang in the roses, as the summer breeze carried the scent of lavender and thyme, Edmund felt tears slide down his cheeks, not tears of grief this time, but tears of gratitude so profound it could not be contained. The Duke had thought the Duchess was gone. He had mourned her. He had nearly destroyed himself with guilt and sorrow. But she had returned, and in returning she had brought him back to life. That was the truth he would carry forward, that love, real love, does not surrender to death or distance or despair. It finds a way. It endures. And if you are brave enough to let it, it comes home. If you watched this far, it's because you felt the weight of this story, the grief, the courage, the impossible return. Leave a comment saying, "I watched this far," so I can know who truly treasures these tales of love that refuses to die. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to remember that love can survive even the darkest separation. And if you cherish period stories that honor the resilience of the human spirit, subscribe to this channel. Because here, we believe that the greatest victories are not won on battlefields, but in the quiet courage of choosing to love again after loss. Until the next story, may you find your way home to those you love.